The Emory and Henry football investigation has come to an end. As many of you may know, last spring the NCAA began an investigation on the recruitment of two prospective football student athletes. The investigation took place after a parent of one of them, a former student athlete at Emory and Henry College, claimed that the recruitment practices of his son were irregular. The irregularities that were present were financial aid packages that included money that was outside of its parameters of the normal awarding process. After this investigation, it was found that 7 scholarships were present on the basis of athletic criteria. It is known that Division III sports teams are not allowed to give out scholarships and award student athletes money for their athletic participation. Because of Emory and Henry's awarding of this money, many penalties were assessed to the WASP, including the elimination of the wins by the program completed in 2012 and 2013, a 2-year probation by the NCAA, a requirement that coaches inform recruits of the probation, a limitation on coaches' off-campus recruiting activities, and the restriction of contact between recruits and any person other than a coach that may be a representative of athletic interest. Here to talk more about the situation at hand is the athletic director of Emory and Henry College, Myra Sims. Myra, thanks for being on the set with us.
Sure,
today.
glad to be here.
So, wow, that was a doozy. But the NCAA can be a little bit ambiguous in their terms and in their releases. And for our audience, I want you just to sort of dumb down what this means to our football program here at Emory and Henry College.
I think the most important thing to know out of all this is that no team here at Emory and Henry faces any postseason ban going forward. And that was most important to us as we went through this process, because that and whether or not it had impacted eligibility of any individual student athlete, their ability to participate, those would have been the 2 worst case scenarios in my mind, because that would have affected the experience of the student athletes in the program. And of course, we placed that experience at the highest priority here at Emory and Henry. So we were very pleased that the outcome was such that we do not face a postseason ban, and that was a little bit confusing in the official NCAA release. But we do not face a postseason ban, nor do we have any other student athletes whose eligibility will be impacted. Obviously, vacating wins and being on probation, we're disappointed and embarrassed by that. But does it really impact the experience of the student athletes in the program now? No. It's administrative stuff that we have to do, mainly at my level, that will impact my day. But I'm just very pleased that we're not going to have any impact on the experience of the student athletes.
And shortly after the news was released, you had a press conference, and I have that here with me today, and I want to sort of dissect it. You said that there's 7 scholarships that were noted to have athletic criteria involved with them, but only 2 of the student athletes reported to the NCAA. So what's sort of the miscommunication there between the 2 and the 7?
They're actually completely separate incidents, I guess you could say. The 2 student athletes whose recruitment was deemed to be improper was found to be that because the college went outside of the way we normally award financial aid in those 2 specific cases. So if you read the report, there was a finding. Number 1 was about student athlete number 1, as they referred to the person. Finding number 2 was about student athlete number 2. Both involved the college going outside of that normal awarding process. The endowed scholarships is a little bit more difficult to explain, and I'll do my best to make this understandable. It does get confusing, and as I've said to you, I had to learn a lot more about financial aid than I knew as this unfolded. But basically, out of the 321 endowed scholarships that we have here at Emory and Henry, as we went through this and began to examine them, we found that 7 of them had been set up years ago, some as early as 1981. In fact, they had all been set up between 1981 and 2002. But the college, for some reason, had permitted donors to list athletics as either athletics participation or athletics leadership as one of several awarding criteria, which is not permissible in Division III. The reason we did, so the count, the 3rd count, just had to do with the fact that that was ever allowed to be part of those scholarships. The good thing for us was really 2 things: that we had never awarded those scholarships outside of our normal awarding process. They were used to replace unfunded aid in students' packages and had never added to a student athlete's package. And then we acted very quickly in about January of 2014 when we realized, when I first saw the list of scholarships and saw that athletics was listed, I knew we had a problem right away, and we began immediately to contact those donor families and have athletics removed as one of the award criteria. We had to have the families sign new agreements with the college. So in this year, and each of those scholarships are awarded annually. So in this year's award cycle, by the time it came time for us to award those again, athletics had been removed. If we had not done that, more student athletes would have potentially had their eligibility impacted, but because we had acted swiftly to remove that, and because we had never gone outside of our normal process in awarding those, no individual student athletes had any issue.
And so in terms of penalties, one of the real only penalties I saw was the probation and the limitations that the coaches have in this probation period. What are some of those limitations?
Right. Well, we are required as a condition of being on probation, we have to have a link on the opening page of gowasps.com that anybody, recruit, a parent, whoever, can go there and immediately find information about the case. The football coaches have to go further for the 2 years of probation and inform any prospective student athlete very early in the process that we are on probation and give them some details about the penalties and about what happened. We do have to vacate wins from 2012 and 2013 as well, and again, that's, it's paperwork, it's going back and making those changes. As far as the coaches off-campus recruiting, they are limited to 14 days per month off-campus for the term of the probation. So, we're already working with the coaches to make sure that we can continue to recruit effectively, and I think Coach Newsom and his staff feels that they will still be able to go out and recruit players, and obviously this is a little bit of an administrative burden that we're going to have to deal with for the 2 years, but again, not having a postseason ban, and we feel like that would have been much more damaging to us in terms of recruiting.
Yeah, and reading about the subject matter online, two different websites, Tri-Cities and WCYB, mentioned that Emory and Henry was trying to beef up the athletic program now. Could you just explain to our viewers and to myself what exactly that term beef up means?
Well, that was probably not really used correctly. What I think they were trying to say was that we are beefing up our educational efforts to make sure that we don't have any sort of issue like this again. We already had a program of education and compliance within the athletics program. Because the issue with the two, with all three of the, findings against us involved recruiting and endowed scholarships that were not properly set up, involved financial aid office. We have been working to beef up our education across different offices on campus. We have formed a working group that includes myself, the Director of Financial Aid, Director of Admissions, and someone from the Advancement Office, and we're meeting now a couple times a semester just to have better communication. Folks from our Financial Aid Office are going to be required to attend an NCAA rules educational program in each of the 2 years of the probationary period. We've had to implement some ongoing education for our Board of Trustees because one of these alumni that became involved in one of these cases was a trustee. So we've instituted annual education for the Board of Trustees at their fall meeting that will be ongoing. So when the term beef up was used, I think the inference I hope people would draw would be that we're beefing up our educational efforts to reach a broader audience in hopes that we could prevent anything like this from ever happening again.
Now, I want to talk about you a little bit. You're an athletic director here at Emory and Henry College.
Mm-hmm.
You're not new to the business, and this is a big deal. The NCAA investigates your program. What do you take from this? How does it feel to finally have this over with?
Well, first of all, it doesn't feel like it's over with. In some ways, it feels like this is just the beginning to me. For 2 years, it was a secret, basically. This first came to my attention, the first complaint from the father, in April of 2013, almost exactly 2 years ago to the day today. So for 2 years, we have had to quietly, confidentially work through this. Having it be out in the open in some ways is a relief that at least we can start to talk about it and educate people and hopefully start to move forward. But we're going to have a lot of work we have to do during this probationary period. And it is a scary thing. Certainly as a 30 years in athletics. I hoped I would never see this or be a part of something like this, and it's certainly been a learning experience. What it's pointed up to me, and as I've shared this with many of my colleagues around the country at other Division III institutions or at our conference office, what comes out of almost every other director of athletics mouth when they learn about this is it scares them to death, and so many people have said to me it could happen to any of us, because I think we know that none of us can control everybody that might be associated with our program. Obviously, the first thing that came up involved an alumni who was a trustee talking with a prospective student athlete at a recruiting event. And the second case was essentially the same thing, an alumni who visited with a recruit off campus. So, none of us can know everything that goes on, and that's why it's so important that we just try to educate as widely as we can, try to promote an atmosphere of compliance with our coaches and with the people that we do have more close contact and some level of control over, and that's really all you can do. And that still doesn't always ensure that you're going to prevent these things from happening, but certainly it has been educational for me. I've learned a ton going through this process, as I said earlier, about financial aid, about how the NCAA works, some of which I probably wish I didn't know, but I am relieved to some degree to be at this point, and to be here talking with you about it, and to let people know what's happened, and hopefully just talking about it helps to make sure we don't end up in a situation like this again, and maybe help some other institution learn from what we've gone through. I know the commissioner of the Old Dominion Athletic Conference has already asked me to talk with the other athletic directors at our annual meeting, which is coming up at the end of May, I believe, and to talk a little bit about what we've gone through and kind of what the lessons are that might be instructive for other folks to take back to their campuses. So hopefully it ends up being a good thing, both for us and some colleagues that are close to us.
Yeah, you mentioned moving forward, and I think coming on the Allen set and, explaining exactly what happened to us and our viewers is definitely a step in the right direction. And that's all we have time for today, but thank you very much, Myra Sims, for coming on the Allen set.
Thank you, Kevin.
That'll do it for this episode of the Sports Interview. I'll now send it over to Nathan Fischel with the Sports Update.